Good morning, those that have already entered the meeting. This is Pat Monticelli with the Broomfield Chamber of Commerce. We are going to start our meeting as soon as we have most of the folks that have registered into the room. We will start no later than 8 o'clock this morning. So far, we've got about half of our attendees in the room so far. So please take this time to get yourself a cup of coffee or whatever your morning ritual is, and we will start shortly. Thank you.
Legendary, I'm not sure, but I do appreciate the kind words. So what I'm hoping we're going to do today in the next 30 minutes or so is just give you sort of an economic discussion / update on where we are. Obviously a year with tremendous amount of uncertainty, and we're doing a number of these presentations and, as highlighted, around the state, really make an effort to sort of understand the entire Colorado economy. But we do more work, quite honestly, in the North metro area. So talk a little bit about that as we go along. Looking at the situation, let me start with just some, this is based off of our 56th annual economic outlook that we released in December. At least the forecast piece is related to that. It can be accessed along with all the other work we do, open to the public at this email address, colorado.edu business and /BRD for Business Research Division. So our confidence index, our Secretary of State's report we just released last week, as well as our forecast updates are all at that location. So let me start off with a little bit on the national economy and then move along to the state economy with some Broomfield North Metro material mixed in. So as you know, the fourth quarter GDP came out. It was it was 4% seasonally adjusted annual rate. So after having this sort of V-shaped recovery, it became a little bit more modest. This, of course, is in reaction to some of the secondary outbreaks we saw in the of coronavirus. Certainly, we experienced some of that here, and some of these, sort of situations certain industries were facing in the fourth quarter. Nonetheless, that red X that you see there is sort of when we think we'll get back to the previous level of GDP, which is roughly end of the third quarter, maybe the fourth quarter of this year. So in terms of getting back to the same level of output, we'll be there, or the previous peak will be there at the latter part of this year. In terms of getting back to being on the line we should have been on, the potential growth line we were on before, that looks to be further out in the future. And it's one of the reasons you're hearing this great debate about the stimulus package right now. I'm not going to discuss that in any sort of detail. If there's a question, I'll be happy to answer that. But it's closing, quote, the output gap, or is it going to potentially overshoot the output gap that's there right now? So where do we think this growth is coming from in 2021? We certainly think the consumer continues to be an active player. We think that businesses, we expect to see continued activity in business fixed investment. Government spending, while high, is tempered a little bit given how incredibly high it was in 2020. And one area that continues to be a drag is the export picture. So this is something we're going to be looking at. It could be helpful if that export picture became a little bit more positive, especially for certain sectors of the state economy specifically. We look at the employment picture, you don't quite see the V that you saw in the GDP numbers. You see something more that we've been calling a swoosh, some people call a check mark. But you can see the last couple of months, we actually had a dip in December and then a slight increase in January, but we really see a slowdown. And again, this is why it's, the discussion, if you will, going back and forth on the stimulus package, very focused on the fact we're still down about 10 million jobs. So as much as the recovery has occurred already, I would highlight to you that we're still down 6.5% from where we started this. And we never got down that percentage of jobs in the entire 2008 recession. But unlike the 2008 recession that you see took us over 6 years to recover, we think the job numbers will be back by 2023 or so. So we think this is going to be a shorter recovery in terms of the jobs. We had a healthy economy going in. We had banks in solid financial position, consumers in pretty good financial position. So the overall financial health of the economy was pretty strong when we entered this. So the most recent employment growth numbers are out, and you can see actually a couple of states that are not too far away from us. The really light yellow ones had positive job growth year over year through December, the 1-year growth rate. Colorado is not in that category. We've slipped down to sort of being in the middle of the pack in terms of job growth. We lost, over 4%, between 4 and 5% of our jobs during that time. So we had, we're not in the leader of the pack anymore. And some of that had to do with the November and the December numbers in particular. We saw job loss in both months in Colorado. And as you're probably well aware, we saw a pretty big jump up in our unemployment rate in the December numbers. So part of what I'm trying to do is, address some of the issues that I was asked to address, particularly looking at, retail and potentially changes in demand for office, some of the things that are really important for the Broomfield area, the city and county of Broomfield. So when we look at what happened, this is it's shocking to see it in a graph, but we all sort of lived through it. We had this tremendous surge in personal income that was really brought about by stimulus checks that we received, but also by the enhanced unemployment benefits that unemployed people got, not only the state benefit, but the federal benefit. So we had this tremendous jump up in personal income that was really driven almost completely by transfer payments, government spending, if you will, government transfers. And then we saw a drop in consumption, but a recovery, although a little bit weaker now in the more recent months. And this incredible increase in the savings rate, which tailed off, but now more recently has picked up again. Again, this is another piece underlying the stimulus debate that's going on back and forth. If you give people stimulus checks and they put it in their savings account, yes, they're better off. But is that really going to bring the economy back? Is it going to re-employ the 10 million people who are unemployed? So when we look at the picture with retail nationally, you can see year over year, we're actually up from December over December. This is nationally again, up 2.9% year over year and 2.1% from the peak before we went into the downturn. And you can see tracking back here that it took us 41 months to get back to the same level of retail sales back in the last recession. And we're already back there. We returned to the previous peak after just 5 months. So very, very V-shaped recovery in terms of retail sales. Although, again, a little bit of caution there. When you look at the far right-hand side, you can see 3 consecutive months of decline. Nonetheless, it hasn't been even, and that's sort of the story we want to tell here right now. We've seen certain categories of retail do really well, building materials, sporting goods, motor vehicles, and so on, and you're well aware. And then you look at the bottom part year over year, and you've got categories that are down over 20%, in particular department stores. So if you can think about, the shopping center and how this might be impacting, it's impacted some of the tenants in the shopping center in Broomfield. So when you look at that, sort of help make you think through sort of those things. What types of things have really been impacted? Obviously, food service and drinking places, we know that. Although, some cause for optimism, right? You have to have some cause for optimism or reason for optimism between going to yellow, 5-star certification, and going to yellow, vaccines rolling out. I put all of that in the sort of optimistic mode. I just don't know how long it's going to take for all of these things to come back, and how many things might be different than they were before. And talk a little bit more about that in a quick moment, which is teleworking. So I want to highlight this particular slide. I'm almost done with the national slides here, but this is a monthly survey that's done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the red bar is where it peaked in the pandemic, the amount of telecommuting. The blue is the reported number for December. And then you can see, so you can sort of see the difference between the peak and where it is, but you can also see there's significant numbers of people have been telecommuting, and when people, and which industries. And I particularly highlight that the first and second one on here, because as you'll see a little bit later in my comments, you're going to see that there's a lot of professional and technical service employment and information employment in city and county of Broomfield. So you have categories of workers that have telecommuted a lot and might continue to telecommute. That's one of the sort of uncertainties we have going forward. So let me close my the national piece. This, for me at least, of course, is an area of concern. I don't know what we could have done much differently in 2020, but we're really running up a significant amount of debt as we go here. We're going to hit over 120. We are at over 120% debt to GDP ratio in this business cycle, or in this government funding cycle, which is October 1 to October 1 through next year, September 30th. Well, not next year, this year, September 30th. So we're carrying a pretty big debt load. Will that come home to roost? If it does, where is it going to show up? There have been some who've questioned whether or not it's going to feed inflation, or if the additional stimulus might feed inflation. The Fed has given us no indication so far that they're going to back off from their purchasing of Treasury securities. So not just keeping rates down in the short run, but also the long-term rates. We'll see if anything changes in the inflation scenario, if they're going to do that. But right now, it looks like pretty much like all ahead full, at least for the next year. So although we're seeing some movement upward, and we have seen some movement upward in the 10-year rates, they're still at very, very low rates in any sort of historical context, as you can see from this slide. So inflation is one topic that I just briefly addressed a moment ago, and a lot of people are paying extreme attention to this. If we put a lot more money into the marketplace and we don't have the ability to resume all of those services at the same level, meaning people running out and being able to consume restaurant meals at the same level and so on, what might that mean for at least certain sectors seeing bump up in price? So that's just sort of the cautionary tale there. I do want to highlight, until the end of 2020, Denver, Aurora, Lakewood MSA, which Broomfield is included in the bigger picture in the measurements, when we look at that, we're seeing an increase, or that's how the inflation is measured for the state. We were trailing the national number until the last 2 months, and now we've bumped up and we have higher inflation once again than the country as a whole. And you can see all the way back in this entire slide, every year Colorado has had higher inflation. One of the areas that's really contributed to that, clearly shelter has contributed to that, the bottom left-hand box, but we're also have seen a contribution to that in medical care in the bottom right-hand box. And this year, 2020, we saw a lot more competition, particularly in the metro area north, and really seem to keep healthcare costs more in check than they are nationally. But still, we had higher inflation overall. So moving along to Colorado with, again, some Broomfield materials sprinkled in. We're anticipating through the State Demographer's Office a slowing in migration to the state, a slowing population growth overall for 2020, 2021. And then you start to see it tick up and as we go out a little bit. Part of that's state to state migration. Part of that is just the slowing population growth in the country as a whole. And some of that was fueled by the slowdown in migration, international migration to the US. So the country as a whole only had a 0.35% population growth reported in December for the year over year. And that, again, slower international migration and certainly the impacts of losing people due to the coronavirus, but very slow population growth in the country. And again, we see slowing population growth in Colorado. When we look at employment, you can see it's been dispersed in the state. I mentioned to you we're sort of in the middle, but some of the districts or some of the metropolitan statistical areas are doing better than others. Grand Junction has been doing particularly better. We'll see when the revised data comes out in next month whether or not all of these numbers hold, because this is based on the monthly numbers that we see, and the quarterly numbers that come out with a lag are more reliable. So we're going to see the quarterly adjustments come out and the data revised for the entire year for 2020 in a month ahead, and we'll see how much this holds up. But overall, obviously, we've seen weaker growth in the north sort of metro or the north metro area. In terms of jobless claims, we had been doing well. We had this incredibly high peak way back in April and May, as you might imagine, and then we saw it slowly coming down. Even when it came down, it was elevated at over 2 times what it was before going into this. But then we saw a ramp up in November and December with moving to red status and some businesses seemingly disappearing completely at that time, some real stress on certain sectors of the economy. There is an issue here with fraud, and I know everybody's aware of that. And the state's been making a lot of efforts to clean that up. So you would think with the weekly data, they're trying to get all of that taken out or filtered out. But with the continuing claims, that should be really taken care of, because once a fraudulent claim is filed and after tracking it through, they figure that out. It shouldn't be sort of the continuing claim associated with that. So bottom line here is we're starting in the more recent data to look better, but this does reflect what happened to our numbers in November and December. Certain counties, the darker brown are the higher unemployment rates, and it's again where you live, not where you work in terms of the unemployment rates. You can see, and then the very best unemployment rates are out on the Eastern Plains. So you can also see the tourism counties are more affected as well. So moving along, this is where we are through December in terms of employment gains. And again, I would highlight at the top management of companies and enterprises, because I'm going to come back here to Broomfield in just a moment with some information on that. But let me just sort of highlight that now in the positive territory. And then in particular at the bottom, You can see the 4 lagging categories on the left-hand graphic: arts, entertainment, and recreation in terms of percentage of job loss, but it's a little bit smaller category in terms of number of jobs. Accommodations and food services is the gigantic one. And if you look into the right-hand side, down 70,000 jobs, December over December, that one category. So, you know, the state is, as I'm going to show you, we think is going to be down about 150,000 jobs for 2020. And you can sort of say half of them are in one category: accommodations and food services, which is, as it sounds, hotels, restaurants. So it's very similar. So Broomfield employment, this is where you are, and this is 2019 numbers. Broomfield as a county, we don't get monthly numbers on Broomfield. We get what's called the QCEW, that quarterly information I was telling you about. And this information lags. So you can see where this was in 2019 for the year. We looked at, you know, the different concentrations, and your largest concentration, your top 5 industries are have control or have about 57% of your employment, as you can see from my line item there. And then in red, these are industries we think are at risk or have been at risk. So you can sort of see that most of your top performing industries or big contributors are areas that really haven't had much impact. Retail has, and I guess you would say going forward, and again, since I was asked to address that, going forward, you know, do we see continued impact from the e-commerce piece of that? Accommodations and food services is the 6th line item down there. So that's your restaurants and your hotels. And then healthcare and social assistance have been impacted. We're hopeful there's going to be recovery there once the vaccine is more widely distributed. You'll see government, and you'll see this in the next slide as well. This tells you your relative size of employment compared to the US. So how concentrated are you in certain industries in Broomfield City and County? And so when you look at this, for example, in the information sector, which includes telecom, you have 6 times the concentration of the nation. When you look at management of companies, this is corporate headquarters. You're over 5 times the concentration of the country. Those are great categories. And so is professional, the third one, professional and technical, twice the concentration. Those are all really high wage categories. So when you look at that, and even manufacturing, you're over concentrated in manufacturing and construction. I want to highlight, you're all the way down on the right-hand side with government. I think that's a little misleading, so let me just explain just very quickly why your percentage of government is so small. Included in government is state government, federal government, local government. So in particular, it's the majority of government employment is state and local. Well, I don't know how much you have in the way of state, but local K through 12 and all those other things, as well as the city and county governments are included. Well, you don't have a school district of your own, as far as I know. And so your teachers are getting reported through the location of the school district they're in. For example, if Boulder Valley Schools is servicing a particular area of Broomfield County, those folks are being reported in government employment in Boulder. So I think it's deceptively low. These people are still working in Broomfield. You just don't see them reported on this in this particular format of QCEW. So this is your overall picture. And unfortunately, again, this is back through June because we don't get monthly numbers. So you can see how much it tailed off during the height of the pandemic. We'll know more as we get the next quarter of data, how much it's recovered. I would point out, I didn't talk about this very much in terms of looking at employment rates or unemployment rates, but when you look at the big picture here, what we've seen is the higher wage categories are pretty much back at the same level of employment that they were at before going into this. The middle income industries are down a little bit, and the low income industries are down a lot. And as you can see, in November and December went down even more. So this would be, of course, retail. This would be the restaurant business and the hotels and so on. They're included in that red line on the bottom. So when you look at the wages in your area, which I'm going to show you in just a moment, you just have a lot of high wage sectors that are dominant. And so you really haven't suffered that kind of employment loss in the area. So this is our forecast for 2021. You can see it's got a barbell. That's just based on all the uncertainty we have out there. We're saying 40,000 jobs, but we have a pretty wide bracket on that. But if you look at 2020, we think when the number comes in at the end of the day, it's going to be somewhere around 145,000 or 150,000 job loss. So it's going to be a big number when we get the official number for 2020. And that's why, again, we're talking about the road to recovery, bringing all these jobs back. That's a multi-year process. So this is our forecast for 2021. Again, you see the biggest recovery in leisure and hospitality, but the losses were just enormous in leisure and hospitality. Some recovery in retail and in the trade category, which includes retail. And then over on the far right, we think government lags this in terms of revenue issues and so on. So we think the government piece will be, still continuing to suffer throughout this year. So this is where Broomfield ranks in terms of the Front Range counties, the highest wage in terms of average annual wages that I was alluding to a moment ago, and substantially higher, almost 50% higher than the state average. So really high wage industries in those categories that I mentioned to you. So one interesting piece, and I'm sure people in the county know this already, but the city and county know this already, but you have about, according to data sources that we looked at, that we pieced together, you have about 34,000, over 34,000 people who in-commute and 31,000 who out-commute during the time period based on what's reported by BEA and by the Census Bureau. So looking at that in terms of personal income, you basically, the people who are in commuting are getting salaries and have their money in another county. And the people who are out commuting getting money from the other place wherever they're working, and they're, say, bringing it back into Broomfield. But so the interesting piece there is that, first of all, there's more people in commuting than out commuting. But second of all, the people who are commuting in, since Broomfield has the highest wages by a county, on average, these people are making a lot more money. So that's why you have this sort of personal income outflow. So capturing that, I guess I would say, in terms of retail is an interesting piece. Can you get some of those people who are coming in to spend more money here, more money here in Broomfield? And I think that's the thought, of course, of why you need the return of the restaurants and the retail and so on. All right, so moving along more quickly and trying to make sure I get through this. We have seen home price appreciation throughout the state, but it is a slower one-year home price appreciation in many other parts of the country. And you can particularly see the percentage change has been higher in Pueblo and Colorado Springs. If you looked all the way to the left of this graphic, that you may find interesting. So this covers the entire country, all the MSAs in the entire country. The ones to the far left-hand side of this graphic, 3 of them are in Idaho. So you're seeing this movement to sort of the more rural areas and really huge price appreciation in those more rural areas. The slide in there for Denver for commercial space, since of course there's an issue and you have lots of it. Industrial space increased, but we've seen office space negative absorption in 2020 for the first time in 10 years, and an increase in total vacancy quarter over quarter. So we're paying a lot of attention to that. And again, it goes back to my comments on telework that we looked at earlier. This is the estimate for a total value of construction, and actually 2020 looks like it's going to be up overall after 2019 was a pretty big drop off, but it's compared to the rest of the state, excluding the Denver North category area, including Broomfield. We see the state actually has got stronger construction numbers than the North Metro area. And this is the only source I could find for Broomfield taxable sales. This is from the state data that's out there. So this is November, the taxable sales that are reported to the state of Colorado by the city and county of Broomfield. And you can see November year to date up 2.2%. The month, meaning November over November, down 5.9% from a year ago. But you can see comparables there. I just thought people could, who want access to these slides, we certainly can share these slides with you. You can sort of see the relative sort of position there of the area. Okay, I'm closing out quickly here. DIA through November, the numbers are down over 50%, but with preliminary data from December, which is still down significantly, it looks like DIA is going to be the third busiest airport in the US. So our reliance on domestic traffic has put us in a relatively better position, but we're still down dramatically, and that's an important part of the tourism recovery. So as I go forward here in the last 2 minutes, I'll just show you some indicators we're looking at, and then hopefully there's at least a few minutes for questions. So one thing that everybody asks us is what's going on with bankruptcy filings. And this is from the US Bankruptcy Court. You can see actually we closed out the year down in 2020 from 2019. We have been up a little bit in 2019. Whether it's Paychecks Protection Program, PPP, is helping this out, we don't know. But at least so far, we're not seeing a tremendous amount of impact in terms of Colorado bankruptcy filings. So that's one thing, again, we're keeping a very close eye on. We also track new entity filings from the Secretary, through the Colorado Secretary of State's office. We've done this for quite a number of years, and we have seen a really high correlation with new entity filings and future job growth. I'll show you a slide that backs this up in just a second, but new entity filings year over year are up very strongly, and you can see the last few months over there. So we are seeing a lot of initial filings on potentially launching new businesses. This gives us optimism going forward. Colorado happens to be, over the period of, I think we assessed this from 2011 to 2019. When we look at the data on the next slide, you'll see this, but we're number 4 for the percentage of young firms in the country. And when we've regressed this against job growth, we find that there's a very strong linear relationship between young businesses and employment growth. And you can see how far out we are in Colorado over during the period 2011 to 2019. You can see our neighbor to the west all the way out at the end. Again, one of the strongest economies in the country, in Utah. And then our indicators were not positive for the first quarter. This is our leading business confidence index, but became much more positive for the second quarter. And I think very much associated with having the rollout of the vaccine and having more businesses being, well now going to yellow, but businesses feeling better about recovering some of the lost sales that they've had over the last year. So I'll leave you with this slide, headwinds, tailwinds, the things we're looking at out there, but I would rather take a couple of moments if there's questions to answer the questions than to talk through this.
All right, thanks, Richard. Appreciate that very much, and fascinating presentation. We do have a few questions in the chat, so we'll take those in the order that they came in. And Richard does have a hard stop at 8:40. He does have a class to teach this morning, so we'll get to as many of these as we can. Richard, the first question comes from Seth Patterson. It asks, what range of stimulus or relief do you believe most appropriate from Congress now?
Yeah, put me on the spot, Seth. Thank you. Um, uh, Personally, and again, I speak for myself, always have to be careful here when I answer questions given my employer. I do not believe we should be doing any more stimulus checks to people who are making over really basically low income levels. I think we've gotten kind of crazy, and that money's going into savings. I would suggest that we should be putting as much money as we can possibly afford into virus mitigation, because that's what's going to get the economy back on the road to recovery. So I'm very supportive of the money that's being allocated for that. I am also supportive, but you can boo when I say this, for support for state and local governments, because we know there's going to be a lagging effect there. So that part said, I think the number is under $1 trillion, not 1.9 trillion, in terms of closing an output gap and actually propping up sectors that have slack, getting the slack out, as opposed to just throwing a whole lot of money into the system.
All right, thank you. Next question comes from Randy Aarons, and it asks, based on President Biden's rollback of Trump's corporate business tax rate, how might that impact job growth if corporations refrain from investing in new products?
Yeah, I don't have an analysis of that yet, but obviously it could. This is, one of the things, the effective tax rate has been so attractive for businesses. Will they, without that, will they pull back? I suspect they will pull back. I just don't know how much. And I don't know if that's going to be the dominant reason that businesses don't invest. I think if they see the booming economy, they will continue to invest, knowing they can make profit if the economy comes back to health. In absence of that, businesses invest based on expected profits in the future. So they need to know that investment is going to be a sound one.
Kurt Sava asks if you can comment on your thoughts regarding inflation.
Yeah, so a couple of things that are there. One, and I kind of just alluded to this, if you keep giving money to people and they have to figure out how to use it, some of them, we see huge balance sheets in banks now. People are, even at very low interest rates, a lot of people are putting money into their savings accounts. But we also see, stock market run up. We're also seeing nationwide real estate run up. So I think the amount of both stimulus and monetary and fiscal stimulus we have out there is really putting pressure on prices. So that's a sort of a more generalized statement. I think to the extent we have all of this money out there and we don't have, again, the products to buy or the seats at the restaurant or people able to go into a restaurant or whatever, I think that portends for run-ups in other types of prices where they can buy things like goods. I think you'll see price pressure more significant in a more significant way a couple of years out, but it's certainly something we're monitoring, and it would certainly be something we monitor really closely, depending on the size and composition of this next stimulus.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. This one from Greg Strong. What economic impact do you foresee as related to the low population growth, both nationally and in Colorado?
Well, in the short run, you'd say you might say not a huge amount, especially, let me start nationally, because we have so much unemployment in the system right now. We got to get jobs for the people who are unemployed and so on. But ultimately, that's going to lead to labor shortages down the line when the economy is back on track. I think what our real estate community has made the case is that probably means for example, housing demand. Right now, people are buying even rental properties in housing demand, but is that going to change if we don't have as much population growth? Do we need to think a little bit more carefully about that? But the international migration, while it's a small number of people who come to Colorado as international migrants, percentage-wise, it's like 22% of our in-migration has historically been international. So when we're looking at this is jobs in high tech, but this is agriculture. This is our tourism industry. In the mountains, we get people from all over the world who come to Colorado and work in our workforce. So I think the low population growth nationally, and I don't want to just focus this on in the international piece, but that's part of why we're seeing that low population growth, and that I think that stymies the entire country over the longer haul in terms of economic growth.
Okay, and I think we have hit time. Richard, thank you so much for your presentation today. We really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. Appreciate being with you.
All right, and I know you have to run, so if we'll stop sharing your screen, we'll move on to the next part of our presentation. Thanks again, Richard. We appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, everyone. And as we move forward, I'm going to turn the controls back over to Sam Taylor for the next part of our presentation this morning.
Well, thank you, Pat, and thank you, Richard, for that presentation. That was jam-packed with data. You should always expect that when you're dealing with an economist. Some of it I was quite familiar with it. Others quite a bit of surprise. So I do really appreciate that. In this section of the program, what we're going to do is take a look at 2020. As everyone knows, 2020 was not quite what we were looking for at the beginning of the year. If any of you were at our annual meeting last year, it was packed. There was well over 100 people at Roots, and they weren't even Roots at that time. They pivoted to become a restaurant and outdoor dining. But it was our 60th anniversary. The Chamber turned 60 years old last year. And we pivoted just like everybody else. You can see on the screen, we managed ribbon cuttings safely. Everybody's masked up there. So what I will talk about in the next few minutes is our membership, our business support, events and education, and then we'll turn it over to Mayor Pat Quinn after that. So a few of the highlights. At the beginning of the year, say March or April, when everything shut down, I started talking to some of the other chambers. As many of you know, Broomfield is one of the founding members of the Northwest Chamber Alliance, which includes 7 other chambers in this area. And we work together on areas of common concern. And a lot of the talk there and with other chambers expecting that 20% of our membership either would be out of business or couldn't afford to become members. Happy to say, it's strange to say happy, our membership declined by less than 10%. We worked really hard with our member businesses. If they couldn't pay, we worked with them. We tried to find alternate ways to work with them, promote them, well, that's what a chamber does. We've had new member initiatives, monthly payments, ways to promote people. You'll see in the business support, the red slide on the right-hand side, we started a Facebook group called Broomfield Area Business Strong. And any business, it didn't matter if you're a chamber member or not. If you were in this area, we wanted you to put your information. Were you open? What were your hours? What is changing? What do people need to know? We increased our e-news offering for COVID information and other information of the changing workplace environment. Constantly, we got that out. Put pages on our website for the COVID information so people could go right to it, whether it was coming out from the city, whether it was coming out from the state, whether it was coming out from businesses, how they were reacting. We wanted to make sure it was in there in a concise, easily findable way on our webpage. And we also started a small business fund with the Community Foundation We did manage to give out quite a few $1,000s worth of grants. And we have another round. We're going to be meeting, I believe, on Friday to review some other applications that came in. And we've also worked with the city a lot to promote their small business fund, which they have money that the city has put in themselves and money from the state that they have a granting cycle. So if you are still in need of pandemic relief, the city does have quite a large fund, so you can reach out to them. So other highlights, even though we couldn't meet in person, most of it, we did have 6 networking events that were held in person and 5 that were held virtually. We did have them in January and February, but then when March hit, we had to stop. But we did have some outdoor ones in the summer. And some of these were quite interesting with wristbands for, so people could see if you were comfortable, fist bumps or what you wanted to do for comfort level. We did have our 2020 Gala celebrating our 60th anniversary. It was scheduled early in the year. We postponed it to later on when we had a little more capacity. We usually do our Taste It in the spring, which, as many of you know, is at the First Bank Center, and we jam about 800 people into the bowl and have dozens of food and drink vendors and support our nonprofits. Well, we couldn't do that. So we created a Taste It on Tour event where you can get a digital coupon book, basically, and all of our food and drink members were allowed to put in a coupon for free just to try and draw business to their location. And you can buy one of those passes at tasteitontour.com. And one thing we did is our 60th anniversary, we created a Community of Tomorrow beer with Rails End. It's a fairly low alcohol, easy drinking beer. We were celebrating 60 years in business in Community of Tomorrow. If any of you know your history, it goes back to one of Broomfield's first phrases they had, because Broomfield's been a master planned community for its entire existence. On the education level, we had pandemic-related webinars, best practices, business resources. We even had one on mental health, on children's mental health with Children's Hospital. Some great information because, as many people know, especially everybody with kids, this is having a huge impact with them not being in school, not being able to socialize, and it takes its toll. So that was really good information. And it's not just kids. It's adults are suffering the effects of mental health by being isolated. We did them on a weekly event during September and October because there was so much information coming out, and we wanted to make sure we got it out there and gave people a chance to talk about it. We also had our annual Leadership Broomfield, launched in October, a little bit later because we had to pivot. It's usually an in-person thing, although our final one for the 2019-2020 session ended up in the pandemic and had to be virtual, which this one is now mostly virtual, but I think with the level yellow we're at, I think the next class will actually be in person, which is going to be great. Other things that we've been doing, I forgot we're moving into our board. Jim Vanaken, I want to talk about Jim Vanaken. He left as treasurer this year. It was his 3rd tour of duty for the chamber. Every decade, he said, he has to feel he has to join. But he came on the chamber. Our finances were confusing at best. The board couldn't approve them because they didn't make sense. And we didn't have a CPA. We had a lot of people that really cared about it, but they weren't really sure how to do that. Jim stepped up and basically helped us budget, helped us do the categories, made sure everything was on track. I could not have done anything what I've done without Jim's help. And he has left as treasurer this year after 3.5 years, and he will sorely be missed. So thank you, Jim, for all you did for the chamber. Also leaving our board this year, Grayson Hofferber. Grayson helped start our Young Professionals Network many years ago when it started. He is the president of Millennial Wealth Management. He's not only leaving the board as a member, he was the board chair for 2 years. He helped organize things also, helped with planning, helped get young professionals involved. Very instrumental in what we've done over the last few years. So Grayson, thank you very much for your service to the Chamber. We do have one new board member. United Power serves Broomfield primarily in the eastern part of Broomfield, and Jay Mendoza has decided that he would like to be on our board, and we welcomed him with open arms. Jay, thank you very much for your service to Broomfield and to the Broomfield Chamber of Commerce. Welcome aboard. And as we do every year, we change our executive board and we get a new board chair. Seth Patterson from Patterson and Company has been our board chair for 2020. And there you are. We did a recognition for him. This is the thing we would normally do like the other ones in person, but new times. And our new chair for 2021 is Jerry Morgan for Code Blue Computing. Thank you very much, Jerry, for choosing this role, and Seth for your past service. So our complete board, on the top, you will see our executive committee. As I mentioned, Jerry Morgan and Seth Patterson. Seth is the past chair, so he's still there. Kurt Sava is our new treasurer from Sunflower Bank. Christina Alderson is the vice chair from Palisade Park Apartments. And Cindy Hart is our secretary from Residence Inn, Fairfield Inn and Suites. And you'll see from the rest of the board of directors, we have a wide range of people, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's healthcare, education, real estate, representatives from the city. We appreciate everything our board of directors does. So thank you very much to our board of directors. One of the things we do at the chamber, we have 2 actual employees, but we have a huge reach, and that's because of our volunteers. First and foremost, I'd like to do a call out to our ambassadors. These are the people that work tirelessly. They're at events. They usually have a red ribbon. They are members, but they support new members. They support existing members. They do phone calls. They do everything we need to help the chamber survive and thrive. They will, if you've got a question, they'll answer it. You need help, they'll answer it. You're thinking about joining the chamber, they'll talk to you. They'll come to your location, maybe not today, probably now they'll Zoom call you or do a phone call, but they'll come with a mask if that's what you want. So thank you very much to our ambassadors. We couldn't do it without you. We also have 4 board level committees. The board that says we really need to focus on these. And this was at our last vision session pre-pandemic. We will have another one coming up next month to see what our vision is moving forward. But we have 4 that we really focus on. Concept committee is a concept and events. So basically we have a committee that says, what is good for our membership, but won't bankrupt the chamber? What can we do? So they take those ideas, and the whole idea is how, not why not, it's how can we do this? If it's good for membership, how can we do it? And thank you to our concept committee. They will take that and try and implement it through the events portion of their concept committee. So thank you to that committee. We also have a very robust nonprofit committee. We have engaged many nonprofits. We support the Community Foundation in all their efforts and their support of the nonprofits. We've done some great webinars, some great support. Like I said, we will work with anybody. What do the nonprofits need? Many for-profits want to support those nonprofits because it's just good business and it shows they're a good corporate citizen. And the nonprofit pillar is key to a thriving community. And our for-profit sector knows that. We also have our education committee. Basically, if we're putting information out, the education committee will talk about, okay, how do we put it out? Is it good information? We plan, I hope, we'll see how this evolves, in putting more emphasis too on higher education, K through 12. How do we make sure we have a well-trained workforce, not just the information we put out, but the whole community, how we can help with that. So look for good things out of our education committee moving forward. And finally, our HYPE committee. HYPE stands for Helping Young Professionals Evolve. As we mentioned, Grayson Hofferber was one of the founding members of that. And this is primarily to help our younger workforce. How do they get the training? How do they get the connections? How do they learn how to do connections? Do we need to help certain segments, the very young entering the workforce? How to do resumes, how to network, how to do an elevator speech if they're in sales or they're an entrepreneur. They have regular meetings. They'll do a nonprofit support once a quarter. They try and do an education. And of course, every now and then a social hour, which they are putting on. They just had one yesterday, so you missed that one. And if anybody listening is interested, we are always looking for more volunteers. We need more volunteers. Help us with the mission of helping our community be even better than it is. It's a wonderful community, the entire area. But we need a robust sector. You saw from Mr. Wobbekind's presentation, there are sectors that are really suffering right now. And whatever we can do to help them would be great. So if you can volunteer, email us at info@broomfieldchamber.com. So that brings us up to our state of the city with Mayor Patrick Quinn. I will probably be giving something away, but you may have noticed from Richard Wobbekind that over 30,000 people migrate into work and 30,000 people migrate out to work, which is why the Broomfield Chamber is very interested in transportation. And my guess is Pat Quinn will touch on that. So let me give a quick introduction about Pat. He was first elected mayor in 2007 and served 3 terms, left in 2013. And then he was reelected again in 2019 and is currently serving a 2-year term. He's lived here since 1981. He and his wife, Carlene, have 5 daughters, all of which attended school in Broomfield or are still attending. He has a BS in accounting from Colorado State. If you're a CU Buffs fan, Colorado State's a good school. He's an active certified accountant, tax and contract chief financial services. He still does that on a limited basis. He owner of Quinn and Associates, a CPA firm. As a matter of fact, Pat is still a member of the Broomfield Chamber as a CPA, which we really appreciate that. He has dedicated nearly 40 years of public service to Broomfield. One of the primary areas is an open space. Even before we were a county, he was serving on the Boulder County open space because that's the mechanism you could. And as soon as he was very involved with open space in Broomfield, even serving 12 years on the Broomfield Open Space Foundation on their board. He is also, in his previous time at mayor, he was a member of the Metro Mayor's Caucus, US 36 Mayors and Commissioners, Metro Area County Commissioners, and transportation was one of his primary focuses. So without further ado, Mayor Pat Quinn, thank you very much for joining us.
And good morning, everybody. Carolyn Romero is going to be helping with the slideshow today. She helped me pull this together. I'll point out, if you want to get a CPA excited, have the guy before, Richard Wobbekind, give you all sorts of numbers that are in your presentation. So I was fiercely checking my numbers. There's one place where I'll make a comment that our numbers are a little bit different, but by and large, we agreed. I also want to acknowledge that when I say the state of the city, I think everybody knows that Broomfield is ran by a city council that has 10 members. I am the mayor. I noted about 15-20 minutes ago, we have several council members on that I want to acknowledge. We have Mayor Pro Tem Castriata, Council Members Schaaf, Henkel, Lim, Jezerski, and Lindstedt. This is it's a team effort, the city, and so I want to acknowledge that they're on. So next slide. I always love this slide because Broomfield is we're unique because we're a city and a county, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But our shape is so unique because of the annexation wars that occurred in the 80s and 90s. In 1999, I always like to tell the story. Maybe most of you have heard it. A policeman. It would depend upon what side of the street that they arrested somebody on, whether they would have to process somebody, for booking. They might have to go to Greeley, Brighton, Boulder, or the Taj Mahal. And so in 1999, we had a statewide election that Broomfield became a county, and we officially became a county in 2001. So we have 33 square miles. We can't annex anymore. And we're facing, as I'll talk to today, we're looking at tremendous transformation in the next year or two with significant development projects, demographic changes, and in response to the health and economic crisis. So let's move to the next slide. Broomfield, because of our open space and because of our trails and our education, we get a lot of awards. The awards in 2020 included the 18th best place to live by Money Magazine. We're the 4th healthiest city according to U.S. News Report. We got an award for the working remotely, the 9th best place to work remotely, and so Broomfield gets awards continuously, and that's something that makes all of us proud to live here. So next slide. So let's just start with some snapshots about where Broomfield is right now. We were incorporated in 1961, so we are a fairly new city. We became a city county, as mentioned, in 2001. We're 33.55 square miles. We won't get any bigger. We are a city that runs a county with a mayor, a council form of government, and we have a city county manager. And also note that Jennifer Hoffman, I think, is on this Zoom call as well, who is our city manager right now. Something we're all proud of, we like to brag about, is that we have 200 miles of city streets and nearly 300 miles of trails and bike paths, which is maybe where we're one of the healthiest cities out there. And in 1995, the city set an aspirational goal of 40% open lands. We're now currently over 8,000 acres, well on our way. I think it's like 36% well on our way. And going back to some of the numbers I was checking based on Wobbekind, we're currently at a population of 72,700. I think when I became mayor in 2007, we were somewhere around 50,000, so we're growing. We're going to have a build-up population over 100,000. I note that we have former mayor, Randy Aaron's on the, he's on the call today. I've heard him use the number of 120,000, and so Broomfield's going to be one of the larger cities in the state when we're done. My number for labor force compared to the 40,486 that Richard had is 41,100. We are a wealthy town. Our median household income, I don't have wages, within Broomfield itself is 96,400. So we're a reasonably wealthy community. And as Richard pointed out, one of the phenomena we face is 86% of the people who live in Broomfield works outside of Broomfield, and the reverse is true. 80-some% of the people who work in Broomfield live outside, so it creates all sorts of transportation issues. Our median housing price is $494,400. Our average rent in town is $1,603 for that. I presume that's an average of 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. Our vacancy rate is 4.2%, which is a 25% increase over a year ago, but our vacancy rate overall is 17.6% below the metro area. And our rents, as one would figure, are 6.4% higher than the entire metro area. So once again, we're a fairly expensive place to live. So next slide. The one place where I did have a difference, and I presume it's the slide that Richard had, is based on the timing of when it gets booked in Broomfield or not. Our overall sales tax revenues were down approximately 10%, because I went and looked at my numbers while he was speaking. So our revenues in total in Broomfield are down 3%. Sales tax revenues were down almost 10% according to my sheet. And one of the reasons why our revenues are only down 3% is because we're a city and a county. We have a very diverse tax base with 75 million coming from sales tax and 43 million from property tax. And property taxes, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on whether you're writing a check or receiving it, property taxes tend to go up in down years because property values went up a year or two earlier. But that has helped save us in reducing our reduction in taxes. So I want to give credit to the staff, and particularly Jennifer Hoffman. When the COVID crisis hit in April, the staff was working on ways to reduce the economic hit on Broomfield. There were several things we did. We deferred hiring people. We deferred any CIP project we could. If it wasn't something that was ongoing, or if it wasn't related to health and safety, it got deferred to 2021. So accordingly, Broomfield is sitting better than most of the cities or counties within the metro area, within Colorado, financially, because of the quick action. of the staff that obviously the city council supported every step of the way. We also went fairly quickly, quicker than any other city or county, into providing small business support. I think it was April, or maybe it was early May, that we did our small business enhanced Broomfield program. We did community testing rather quickly, and we were the first in the state to launch the 5-star program. I think it's in my notes, which we did in January, and because we're a city that runs a county with their own public health director, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. When I spoke a year ago to the crowded room, I talked about collaboration, innovation, and inclusive economy, and those goals remain. One point I will make is that Broomfield for the business community we're reorganizing or restructuring our process. We want input into our development projects, in our neighborhood projects sooner. So we're making our concept reviews more robust, so we can then make the entire development process, we can streamline it, although it's still lengthy. We're going to try to streamline it the whole way through. So next slide. As I mentioned, we were the first back to business program. We have certified, which is also called the 5-star program at the state level. We've certified 48 businesses to date. They go from Romney Interlochen to Scalzado's restaurant, which is on First Avenue, and I recommend to everybody. We began accepting applications on December 28, 2020, so that was a month before anybody else did. Let me talk a little bit. Sam talked about the the relief program we have. The legislature approved in a special session business support. And Broomfield's going to get 1.3 million of that. And I'll go back to talk, we had an enhanced Broomfield program where we've received 150 applications to date. We have a combined application for both the enhanced Broomfield and the state grants. We're accepting applications through March 15th. We will grant up to April 1st. On enhanced Broomfield itself, we gave out in 2020 149 businesses with a total grants of $618,000. In 2021, the budget has $100,000 in funding, and depending on how this goes with the state grants, the council may be willing to increase that. Let me make a comment that the grants for the state are based on the statute, which basically had to be in business in 2019. Broomfield doesn't have the same restrictions. So if a business is in need, because they started up in 2020, it'll be the effort of the city to make sure that they're eligible for enhanced Broomfield. So we're trying to make sure that everybody in need gets some type of financial grants from the city or the state. So next. Okay, this is where I noticed there's a couple of people in the crowd that last year we had our first offsite retreat at the Chautauqua in Boulder. We got a little bit of interest on that, but but it was a great 2-day retreat. I really appreciate it, and we set our goals at that point in time. I'll just cover them briefly and go through specifically. But the goals of the city council are sustainability, affordable housing, economic vitality, water, transportation. We added later on in the year, at the request of the city manager, diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, which I'll talk about for a minute. And oil and gas is a priority of the city council. Health and safety of oil and gas is a priority in 2020, and it will continue to be in 2021. So let's go through these. Sustainability. This year we renamed our sustainability committee to the advisory committee on environmental stewardship. And we have set, as I said, we set aspiration goals in 1995 for open space. We're setting aspirational goals for greenhouse gases and zero waste. So our goal right now for greenhouse gases is 26% reduction by 2025, 50% reduction by 2030, and 90% reduction by 2050. City Council has set zero waste goals as recommended by ACES, 50% by 2025, that's diversion, and 100% diversion by 2035. If you'll notice, if you listen to our city council meetings, we're encouraging and basically requiring sustainability efforts in every one of our development projects. Next. So affordable housing remains of significant concern to the city council. Many of us, including me, campaign on affordable housing. One of the consequences of having our great open space and our trails is that we've become a fairly exclusive community, as documented by Richard and myself today. And so affordable housing is something that this council has addressed with passing an inclusive housing ordinance in I think it was March. We met last week or on Saturday, and we were talking about creating an independent housing authority board. The council in 2019 put $1 million into a fund for affordable housing. We anticipate through fees generated by the inclusive housing, we'll have $3 million or more at the end of this year. So we want to have a housing authority board, or at least that's what we're talking about, to help decide where those funds should go with more expertise or more time that the city council can have. And so we're looking forward to updating our housing needs action plan, and it's of great importance to the council. So next. So, on economic vitality, as I said earlier on, we have 3 projects moving forward, or 3 major developments moving forward this year that all of us have paid attention to. Some like the Broomfield Town Square, which is Main Street, Broomfield, we've talked about since 1959, are going to move forward this year. We've already had, I guess I'll make a comment that I think the city manager said that we have over $1 billion of infrastructure that are going to be involved in these projects, and council's learning about TIFs and metro districts and lids and feds, and because they're going to be financed in a whole bunch of different ways this year, and council's going to keep its eye on how they are financed. But the 3 major projects are Flatirons out by the mall, Baseline, which is approximately 1,000 acres being done by McWhinney, and we have project almost every other council meeting that comes to it. And the one that I think everybody we all talk about is the Broomfield Town Square, which will be coming to council several times this year. And I think it's safe to say on behalf of all the council, maybe everybody that's listening to this, that we're looking forward to getting that to break ground. And we were told the other night that it could break ground in 2022, which is exciting for all of us. So next. Water. I'm trying to move fairly quickly because, as everybody knows, I'm cognizant of time on everything we do. Water is a major issue in the West for all of us. I want to give special credit to George Cicero, our city manager for 40 years, and to Charles Ozaki, our city manager that just left last year. It's been on the forefront of every master plan that I've been involved in, and it will be a major subject this year. Broomfield, a month ago, committed to approximately 20% of the Windy Gap firming project, and the total cost of that the Windy Gap project to us will be $200 million. That's the Windy Gap firming project. There's going to be right next to Carter Lake. There's going to be another reservoir, which is the Chimney Hollow Reservoir. We have over $10 million in our budget this year for water distribution system improvements, and we're going to have proposed to us gray water use regulations at a city council. So water is something extremely important to us. We have high water tap fees, but those high water tap fees are based on development should pay for itself. And we're looking at our debt and our finances in the next month or two to make sure we can finance the $170 million debt that we think we're going to have for the firming project. But I think everybody should be pleased to know that we're moving forward on that project in the next year or two. Next. This is one of I showed this a year ago. It's so great. Transportation, as we established, is a huge issue to Broomfield. People moving in and out all the time. This picture is of I-25 headed up to Highway 7, where we would like to see someday a major transit hub, just over I-25. And so the council continues to look at transportation issues, everywhere. Highway 7. We've got some preliminary numbers this year. If you take the total cost from Boulder to Brighton, including the transit hub, which is pretty expensive, somewhere around 150 million. We're talking about 550 million. So the range of the cost of that is somewhat similar to what was on US 36. But well, we're working on projects everywhere. Dillon Road is taking more time than we thought it would, which is 144th. I'm told that it will be completed, which means 4 lanes going both direct, 4 lanes, I guess, the entire way will be completed in the second quarter. We're literally meeting 2 or 3 times a week on transportation issues because it's important. The governor is going to announce next week his plan for funding transportation. I think I was told next Monday or Tuesday he's going to announce that. So everybody's looking forward to see what the legislature is going to do and what the governor is going to support. Next slide. I mentioned diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. Everybody's aware that in May there was the death, the murder of George Floyd was a significant issue. It hit our community strongly, and so we've been looking internally at what we can do to improve diversity, equity, access, and inclusion within Broomfield. The city manager proposed a program that started with the city staff. I believe it was like October, November. She came to staff. They've hired an outside consultant at the staff level. And my understanding, there was preliminary findings that were presented to staff and to the city manager a week or 2 ago. And I guess it's not a surprise that Broomfield is viewed. We need to work on diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. We brought on or promoted Vanessa Oldham, who's our diversity director, in charge of this. And so you'll see several projects this year, and I hope into the future, where Broomfield's trying to, we're a wealthy community, and we need to improve our inclusion and access, diversity, and equity. I'll leave it there. So next one. As I mentioned, oil and gas is extremely important to Broomfield. Broomfield has actually taken the lead for the state of Colorado in our regulations. This map here is a map that shows the setbacks that we approved and the zoning that we approved for oil and gas. As you can see, the purple areas are where, then this is all post SB 181, which was the momentous legislation passed in 2019 that gave local governments power to zone. So there's limited drilling that will occur after the MOU is done with extraction oil and gas. And the 2000 setbacks, while considered controversial, I suppose 2 years ago, have been adopted as a guideline for the state of Colorado by the COGCC. Extraction, we've learned yesterday, we'll be bringing a rig back into town sometime in 2021. So council enforcing the MOU after the bankruptcy of extraction is going to be something of major concern to city council and to staff, and I think we'll just move on to the next slide. So I'm hurrying so we can have times for questions and answers. It's kind of talking about 2020 and 2021 combined. I think it's safe to say that it has been a busy year. I went back and I looked at the webpage, shows that, you have all the videos and stuff for the year. I counted 64 meetings that city council had in 2020. I suspect that that's the most that any city council, although perhaps maybe back in the 90s when they were doing the county and the mall, it was more. That's 5.3 meetings a month. That's a lot of time and effort that was spent. We've done stuff that we did things early on in the years that I pulled out some of the stuff I thought that this group would be interested in. I know that the chamber disagrees, but city council in I think it was February or March, withdrew from the Jefferson Highway Parkway Authority. I think, as everybody knows, there were spikes in plutonium that were found during some of the testing. And I'm going to make this very clear. I'm not running for re-election, so I can be more candid maybe than previously. I grew up in downwind from Rocky Flats, and there is legitimate concerns about Rocky Flats that are coming up in our development projects. So I suspect that there'll be continual review and analysis of Rocky Flats throughout 2021 and going into 2022. Because we can't, we can't just not allow the development projects. Council will come up with some type of strategy and I think it'll be informed and it will be businesslike. Other things that are probably of interest to the Chamber of Commerce: marijuana regulations. We have a moratorium, which I think is going to be lifted on April 1st. The staff has proposed 2 stores, and I agree with that. That we would open up in 2020. I think council anticipates there may be more. So, and these are both retail. These are both recreational and medical marijuana stores, and we'll see that. I mentioned earlier, I'll repeat again, this council is very concerned about transparency, and so we're trying to move a lot of the public comments up earlier. We had a concept review on SunCap like a month ago, where we had over 40 comments from the neighborhood, the Palisades and Hearthstone's neighborhoods, and I was glad to see that, because I think it's important that the city council, the planning and zoning and development, gets that information up front, so we can incorporate it. Because by the time you get to the public hearing, like we're going to have on, continued on Dillon Point tomorrow night, it's hard to change your strategy, and not that we won't. We'll keep, as I said earlier, we're going to work on extraction oil and gas and make sure that whatever operations occur comply with the best practices in the MOU that we have in place, and that it's safe, that the safety and health and welfare of our citizens are number one. I mentioned the oil and gas regulations. We will adopt those in the next month or two. So there's quite a bit going on. Next. So going back to being transparency, Broomfield, and once again, a shout out to Carolyn Romero here. We have a presence, everywhere, or we're attempting to. We're on Twitter at Broomfield. We're on Facebook, /Broomfield. I am told that we're about to go on TikTok, and I've been asked to do a PSA with my 50-year-old daughter, my 2 granddaughters, because I know nothing about TikTok, and we're all going to learn about it. That shows the outreach we're trying to do. We have Be in the Loop newsletters. We started a couple of years ago, I think, the broomfieldvoice.com. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend that you go to it, because it has information about projects in town. It gives a chance to do feedback. It's being enhanced all the time. And for those who know me, I am always available. I have a home office phone that I've had since 2007, which is 303-623-1580, or Pat P. Quinn at broomfieldcitycouncil.org and I'm reachable. I think it's safe to say on behalf of all of council, we're reachable. We look for input for the public, and I will close out and go to questions.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Quinn. Appreciate that. We only have one question in the chat so far, so I'll remind all of our folks that are on the webinar today, if you do have a question for the mayor, we have about 5 minutes that we can devote to questions. So please type your question into the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can in the order that they come in. So, Mayor, the only question I have in there so far is from Randy Aarons, and it says, I have concerns with the current council not supporting regional projects like the Greenway Trail and Jefferson Parkway, and not supporting long-term developers in Broomfield, also potentially hurting our corner arrangement with Adams County. How can our regional neighbors and companies feel confident in working with Broomfield in the future?
Well, I guess coming from the previous mayor, that's I'll recommend he and I have some coffee and a beer together, because each one of those issues are complex. There is a lot going on in Broomfield. I guess I don't agree when it comes to that we're not cooperating with the regional partners. We have a different view than the previous council did. As I mentioned, I'm sure former Mayor Aarons would talk about the Jefferson Parkway. Council's being thoughtful. I think we have a good relationship with our developers. We may provide scrutiny that previous councils did not, and I anticipate that will continue. When it comes down to the corner, we're learning more about the coroner's position. We're going to go out there. So on each one of those, I guess it's safe to say that this council is going to provide a little bit more scrutiny than other councils did, and I'll be frank, I'm proud of that.
All right. Well, not seeing any other questions coming in, I think that's all we have for now. Mayor Quinn, thank you so much for your time today. We sincerely appreciate it. Great presentation.
Thank you.
All right. And with that in mind, I will take a quick moment to let folks know and remind everyone that is on the call today, or if you know someone that signed up and could not make it onto the webinar today, we will be providing a link to the recording of this webinar to everyone who registered for the webinar. So check your email in the next day or two. The link to the recording will come in. We'll leave this link available only to chamber members for about the next week to honor the fact that this is a membership meeting. At that point, we may release it to the public in general through our YouTube channel. But again, everyone on this call or everyone that signed up today will be able to access a recording of this if you'd like to go back to it and refer to it at a later time. With that said, I am going to turn things back over to Sam Taylor.
Thank you, Pat Monticelli, and thank you, Pat Quinn, for that update. As you could tell from his information, the chamber is very independent of the city, but we have an exceptionally good relationship. Here at the chamber, we feel they're very open to all of our comments, whether they're positive, whether they're negative, and always looking for our input. So I do appreciate the mayor, the city council, and especially the staff, because we do work with the staff, including the city manager, Jennifer Hoffman, and head of economic vitality, Jeff Romine. So thank you very much for your partnership we have. Before I go to the upcoming events, our former chair, Seth Patterson, reminded me I left out one of our programs that's really going to be key moving forward for businesses in the coming months and possibly even the next year or two. One thing we started to help businesses is our 110% program. What we're doing is asking any member that is currently up for renewal, if they are doing well, consider paying 110% of your dues, not just 100%. And that extra 10% will put half into programming to help businesses, and the other half of that will go into a scholarship fund for businesses that just can't afford to pay their dues but still really want to be involved. We've already got some interest in that, and we have it set up into a separate account. So we will help businesses. My guess is probably it'll be primarily retail and food and drink establishments to start with, because as you saw from Richard Wobbekind's presentation, those are the hardest hits, and it may even be hotels, because those also have been really hard hit with plummeting nights being stayed there. So if you do want to get involved, some of the events coming up, we do have a business after hours. This one will be virtual. We do have various door prizes and ways that you can network, get to meet new people, talk to them. That will be on February 17th. Again, it's on Zoom. Sign up. Is no charge. You are welcome to donate if you'd like to the chamber, but it will be on February 17th. Our young professionals group is having a lunch and learn, and that will be at noon on March 9th. Again, that one will also be a Zoom. We are also coming up in March having our first annual Topgolf golf tournament. Kicking that off on March 24th. There's still sponsorships available. Go ahead and get your tickets soon. The price does go up on February 22nd, because we're trying to figure out how to staff this, how to do it safely. And we do right now, because of COVID limits, we're limited to 75 people. That's 6 per bay. If things continue to improve, that might change, but we're going to stick with that number for now. So go ahead and register early. And as I mentioned before, Taste It on Tour continues for the foreseeable future, at least through May. Go ahead and get your pass. And I encourage you, when you do redeem it, it might be a buy one, get one free. As some of the restaurants do. It might be a free 10-ounce pour, as one of our breweries does. But I encourage you, when you go there, buy plenty extra, tip very well. Tip like their life depends on it, because it probably does. So those are what's coming up in the next month. So thank you very much for attending. I want to thank Oracle and Sunflower Bank again for helping us put this on, for their sponsorship, and for our webinar partner, the Broomfield Enterprise. And of course, a big thanks to our members and volunteers. Without our members, we don't exist. We are here for the members, and our volunteers help us make our members strong. anything you need us to do, you got any ideas how we can increase our reach to our members or help them, please let us know. We're always open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you all for attending today. That concludes our presentation. Again, it will be available to everyone via your email coming up in the next few days. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.